All right, here we go. We are factoring trinomials in lesson 7.5. Specifically, trinomials whose a value equals 1. So put a big 1 up there if you would. What does this mean? It means that if your trinomial is written in this format, okay, so it's got a degree of 2, then a is the leading coefficient, and that's kind of the most important one. So we're going to start with coefficients that have a 1, which means that there won't be 1 there most of the time. So we just write a 1. All right? Another thing to keep in mind is that unlike 7.4, there is no common denominator, no common divisor, sorry. There's no GCF that we can divide through. All right? And one more thing before we dive into the problem. Here's some helpful thoughts. Can you think of two numbers that multiply, that's what product means, to give you 30, but add to give you 17? For example, 3 times 10 is 30, so they're a product, but 3 plus 10 is 13. This is going to be a common exercise of yours in today's lesson. Hopefully you've thought of it by now. Again, 6 times 5 won't work because they add up to 11, though they multiply to give you 30. All right, but 2 times 15 is 30, and 2 plus 15 is 17. Yay, we found them. So now what about a product of negative 30, whose sum is 7? This time we got to pay attention to that negative. So one of the two multipliers is negative. So for example, 6 times negative 5. 6 plus negative 5 is just 1. So in essence, we're subtracting those two. And 6 and negative 5 don't work. But 10 and 3, and if we make the 3 negative, then it's negative 3 plus 10, which is 7. Yay, that worked. So that's a little exercise that we're going to be doing during the process of factoring. I'm going to be using the area method to find the factors. So you recall this involves drawing that little area model table. All right, and to remind you what that is, I'm going to start off by multiplying m minus 7 times m plus 8. All right, you recall that we put the m here, and the negative 7 here, and the m here, and the 8 here. And then we multiply each of those pieces together. So m times m is m squared. M times 8 is 8m. Here it's negative 7 times m, which is negative 7m. And here it's negative 7 times 8, negative 56. One thing we can see in these examples is usually two of these terms add up. In this case, the negative 7 and the 8. And negative 7m plus 8m is 1m. So collecting my pieces, I have an m squared, I have a 1m and a negative 56, and I'm just going to write it out now as a polynomial, m squared, plus 1m plus negative 56. I could write minus 56 too, all right? And that again, I could also do it via FOIL. Remember we talked about using those distribution arrows in essence. All right. Today though, the lesson, we're going to be going backwards. So we're going to start here and end up here. But to do that, we're going to go to the box and then back to writing it out. All right? Okay, so here's our first example. X squared plus 7x plus 6. All right, we know that this was in the box. So I'm going to put the pieces where I would expect them to show up, right? X squared should show up there. The 6. probably was here. The 7x I can't put in because whatever these two were, they added up to 7x. So I'm going to put x here and x here because that's how I got x squared. Now, what times what is 6? Here is where I want to figure out what two things multiply to give me 6. But when I add those two things up, I get 7. Now, 2 times 3 doesn't work because that adds up to 5, but 1 times 6 gives me 7. So if I put a 1 here and the 6 here, notice we end up with a 6x and a 1x, and those two things add up to 7x. So yes, it works. Hooray. So I have x plus 6 times x plus 1. All right, notice my answer was here and here. And we write those. Doesn't matter which one you put first, which one you put second in those spots. All right. It's kind of nice when they're all plus signs in between here. That really helps simplify and factor. So here you'll notice we have a minus sign there. Notice our a value is still 1. All right. So I draw my box. I put the x squared in the left side. I put the 6 back down here. As we expect, it's going to be x times x. This time, though, when I multiply, again, I've got to get 6. But when I add them up, I get negative 5. Well, 2 times 3 is 6, but 2 plus 3 is positive 5. How do I fix this? Well, hopefully you saw that if they were both negative, they would add up to negative 5. And if I multiply two negatives, I still get positive 6. So negative 2, negative 3 works. We get the negative 2x, we get the negative 3x. So I think we found our answer. All right, and again, x plus negative 2, x plus negative 3. All right. And example C, our last example. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this. We're going to go ahead and draw that area, table, whatever you want to call it. This one is going to be the trickiest because I have a negative 4 and a negative 12. So the negative 12 goes down here. And again, because the a value is 1, this problem starts off with the same x and the x. And all we need to worry about is the negative 12. Again, two numbers multiply to give me negative 12. But when I add them up, I get negative 4. Well, 3 times 4, right? But 3 plus negative 4 only gives me negative 1. So that's not going to work. All right, so let's try 6 and 2. Again, if I put, notice here I got really close. 6 times 2 is negative 12, but 6 plus 2 is positive 4. So when you see this scenario, then you know, oh, I only need to switch my negative sign to the other one. So I know it's got to be a negative 6 and a positive 2. All right, so x plus negative 6 and x plus 2 is my final answer. All right, we're going to be solving these as well when we get to the next section. And I don't think in any of our ones, oh yeah, we do have to solve some of these down here. So I'm going to take that last problem, I'm going to finish solving it, because notice it says solve. And how do we solve? We solve by factoring. So this thing equals 0. So this thing equals 0. So you remember that if x plus negative 6 times x plus 2 equals 0, then either one of these could be 0. So we write x plus negative 6 could be the 0, or x plus 2 could be the 0. Here's where I get my first answer. X equals, add 6 to both sides to cancel the 6, and you get x equals 6. your second answer here, we add negative 2 to both sides, and we get x equals negative 2. All right, so here are my two answers. And when you get to those last problems there, you have to factor and solve. The rest of them will just be factoring problems, right? Even in this word problem, they give you a trinomial, and you've got to factor it. Okay? Good luck in your homework. Hope it goes well.